guys, this is Max and Danny Steinberg. We're partners here at SaberSim, and we're making a video talking about daily fantasy main slates. We made one earlier about showdown slates, which you can check out on our YouTube channels or Vimeo channels, and it goes into strategy for a single game slate. But we want to talk about the main big DFS slates, the ones that have the FanDuel Sunday Million, the DraftKings Millionaire Maker, and just talk about some of the things SaberSim has to offer. So I'm just going to hand it off to Danny.
So we're going to go into the different contest structures and how to use the SaberSim builder to take advantage of that. We're also going to talk about team adjustments and player adjustments and just all the different settings you can use at SaberSim to make the optimal lineups.
Yeah, I think Saber is probably a lot different than what you're used to. I think a lot of lineup builders and the way you can make adjustments are kind of the same across the industry, but we have some unique features that I think are really cool and we're excited to show you. So the first thing I want to talk about is just what we offer that's different with building lineups. So one thing that we offer that's similar to what you might find out on other sites is what we call stacking rules. People might call it something else, but what stacking rules are is essentially a way in which you can sort of like jerry-rig the builder to build the types of lineups you want. So let's say you want lineups that have a stack. Well, you could say, okay, let's have at least some X amount of players, 2, 3, 4, on the same team. Make sure they include a QB, yada, yada. And you end up forcing a stack in every lineup with at least some amount of players. You can also we allow you to make a stacking rule for game stacks, which I think is a popular concept that you're going to hear about a lot on Twitter, on podcasts. And it's about this idea of just playing a lot of players from the same game, not just the same team, and just banking on that correlation, which we're actually really well equipped to do without doing this. And I'm going to get into that. So me and Danny never actually use stacking rules. And I think that might be something for you to get used to, maybe using the SaberSim lineup builder from somewhere else. But what we actually do is rely on the correlation. So one advantage that we have, and I'll just let Danny actually expand upon this, is we simulate the games 10,000 times, right?
Right, and because we simulate the games, we can actually look at, in our simulations, how were different players correlated to each other. And it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So you can see, like, for some teams, a running back can be really correlated to the quarterback. For example, on Carolina, Christian McCaffrey is one of the most correlated players to Cam Newton. But you see with other teams, you often have running backs where they're not correlated at all. And that's because while they may do well because the offense is moving, they don't catch passes from the quarterback. So they don't have that sort of they don't have the correlation that goes with each other. You can see with the Eagles, Jordan Howard, he only has a 0.04 correlation to Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and I think with other builders, you might make a stacking rule to take advantage of this by just saying, okay, well, I'll stack running backs with quarterbacks. But then that doesn't really get into the nuance. And in fact, in this situation, which I think is ironic, is it would actually be better to use Chris Thompson instead of Jordan Howard, projection the same, because Chris Thompson, the running back on Washington, is actually more correlated to Carson Wentz than his own running back. And that's something that's intuitive to us, but it's not going to be intuitive to a lineup builder that doesn't have these correlations to work upon. So I think these are really cool. And what ends up happening when you build lineups with SaberSim is you actually don't need these stacking rules, because if you set this correlation setting high enough, you're just going to get these types of team stacks and game stacks that you want. And, DraftKings does offer a wide variety of contests. There's the Millionaire Maker, where it's really top heavy. There's going to be $1 million for first. And throughout the season, the prize pool is going to be lower, and $1 million is still going to be up there. So, or you'll have something like a satellite to this Fantasy Football World Championship. It's a really top heavy tournament. But then you might have, something like the play action, which is a lot less top heavy. It's 10%, and it's only a 20 max. So maybe lineups will be a little more chalky. There might be worse players in this contest, and that sort of has different strategy as well. So one thing that's cool about Saber is we have these pre-settings. So we have contest style GPP, contest style cash, which obviously you're actually probably going to want reverse correlated lineups.
Right.
you're not really want to care about ownership, or satellites where these settings are going to be really, really high, and maybe you could even set correlation
Right.
to higher.
I mean, the best rule of thumb is the more top heavy the contest, the higher you want the correlations, the higher you want ownership fade, and the less top heavy, the less you're going to want correlation to ownership fade.
Absolutely. So let's just go to talking about adjustments before we actually build our lineups, and we'll go back to this a little later. So one thing that's cool about SaberSim, by the way, is we do have this ownership fade slider, and it'll allow you to basically play off projected ownership and make sure that your lineups aren't too chalky, or maybe that if you set it really high, you're going to really focus on fading those chalky plays, and if you set it really low, it's not going to focus on that at all. And I think one cool thing about SaberSim is we have our ownership projections, but you're also allowed to adjust them. So let's say, for example, and I guess I've already done this, you think, oh, David Johnson has a lot of buzz. I think his ownership projection is going to be higher. You can actually adjust that, and so you can work with really great ownerships. But I think one really cool tool, and I'll let you get into this, Danny, is the team-based adjustments.
Yeah, so one thing that, often with fantasy football, it won't necessarily be an individual player I'm really into, but an entire team. And the team-based adjustments are a good way to do that all at once and to take into effect of not just the team you think is going to do well doing better, but also the effect that team doing better will have on the performance of the opposing team.
Right.
So who's the team you think is going to do well this week?
So one team I personally like is San Francisco. I think there's sort of a lot of negative buzz about Jimmy Garoppolo in the preseason. I don't really buy it. He was an incredible player in the limited time he's played, and I just don't buy preseason performance that much. And obviously, Tampa Bay's defense was terrible last year. I think they're just going to do better than expected.
Right. I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, so we don't disagree with the stakes. So I'm going to raise their point projection by a couple of points. I'm curious what your opinion is on another team.
One team I'm really into is Arizona. I think they're going to play really fast, and I kind of trust their coaching, and I kind of believe in Kyler Murray a lot, so I think they could do really well.
Okay, so we're adjusting their team projections 2 points, and we're going to apply these changes. And what this is going to do is, instead of having to just mess with a bunch of players on an individual level, this is just going to affect things on a team level. So you see David Johnson's projection is up. Kieran Johnson's projection is lower. It's probably because Detroit probably isn't going to play from ahead as much. They might rush it less.
Yep.
Tevin Coleman, we're seeing on San Francisco. If you just actually look at the players on these teams, you're going to see, okay, look, all these players are raised on Arizona. It actually, interestingly enough, negatively affects Charles Clay's projection. There's some nuance in here that you're just not really going to get from just raising people's projections randomly, and it's just not a very good quantitative approach. But doing this, we're just allowing the simulations to do their things and actually raise people on a team level that's proportionally correct. And I think it's a lot better than trying to adjust people on an individual level.
It's way better. It's way more efficient too.
Right. So that being said, you can also adjust people on an individual level. So I know I just raised San Francisco's team projection a lot. I personally really like George Kittle. I do something where I calculate expected fantasy points every week, and towards the end of the season, he was just really, really incredible in that statistic. So, there's probably other advanced statistics you like that you look at. Danny and I are really big fans of airyards.com. It's a great way to do receiver projections. It's something we look at. And, we could actually just look at George Kittle, and you can see that his WOPR is really off the charts if you follow this for someone at his position. He's the best tight end by far, and it's not even close.
31% target share, maybe something you're more concerned with. That's gigantic.
Right. So I'm going to just go kind of ham here and boost him a couple points. I do really think he's the best tight end on the slate.
Yeah. I think one guy I really like is Tyler Lockett. I think Seattle has lost a lot of Doug Baldwin retired. David Moore, their outside receiver, is injured. Their rookie receiver is kind of injured. He's going to play a lot in the slot this year, which receivers tend to do better in the slot. So Lockett is a guy I really like, so I'm going to boost him a little bit too.
Okay. So, during a Sunday, we I make a lot of adjustments. I personally like tinkering with adjustments in NFL. I'm sure you do too. There's a lot of good data out there. So I'd probably, and I'm sure Danny does this too, they tinker just a lot with the different projections. But for now, we're just going to keep it at that. But just wanted to give you an idea of maybe some of the thought processes we use when making adjustments to these projections.
And one important thing to keep in mind to pay attention to is the inactives and the injured players for each team. If you go to NFL.com/inactives, an hour and 30 minutes before the game starts, you can see who's playing and who's not. Sometimes there's surprise inactives, so you want to make sure that you have guys who are inactive, not in your lineups.
Right.
And possibly take advantage of some teams that have some defensive or offensive injuries.
Okay, so we're going to build with the idea that we're sort of building for the millionaire maker. So we're going to set this correlation setting to very high. We're going to set ownership fade to moderate. I think if we had more time to adjust ownership, I might trust the setting that more. But I usually am pretty contrarian when it's all said and done, so I don't really feel the need to set this as high. And then smart diversity is this really cool feature we have. A lot of lineup builders offer something that's called min unique, where they just try to make sure that every lineup has at least 3 unique players. What we actually do is, to diversify our lineups, we make it so each lineup, depending on how high the setting is, only is built on the average projection of like a small bucket of sims. So if you set this really high, it's going to be like 3 sims. And what that does is it sort of captures the natural upside of a player given what actually might happen in the game. So if a few simulations, Odell Beckham Jr. does well, and his average projection in those 3 simulations is 22 points, you're going to almost certainly get him in this one particular lineup that uses that bucket of sims. And so it's a way for when every lineup's built, you're sort of working off different projections that are capturing real upside and allows you to diversify your lineups in a way that I think is really cool, and it's going to actually give you some optimal lineups. So we're going to build our lineup pool, and as most lineup builders, this might take, a minute or two. But I think something that's really, really cool about our builder is the type of adjustments that you actually are going to be able to make after your lineups are built. You have a lot of control, and you can see here a preview of what type of control you have.
So one thing we do differently than other sites is when we build lineups, if you want 150 lineups, we'll actually build you 1,000 lineups. Once you build all your lineups, you actually don't have to go back and adjust again. If you want to adjust the exposures you're getting from players, it'll just take from this pool of lineups to get the sort of pool. It'll take from the bigger pool of lineups to get the smaller pool of lineups that you actually want.
Right. So my philosophy in general here is I view this more in the sense of quality control. So our lineups are built, and now we're just looking and seeing, is there anything here that maybe we just overlooked or now disagree with, and do we want to change that? And I think one thing that stands out for me is Larry Fitzgerald. So we did boost Arizona, but I'm kind of weirded out by his playing time. It seems like he might split time with Christian Kirk. I don't know if I want any part of this projection. He's also, I think 40. And I think maybe a little younger. But I think what's cool about Saber is, you could do something where you cap his exposure. We say, we just want to have 25% exposure to Larry Fitzgerald instead of 35. And this will happen instantly, by the way, because what we're doing is just swapping out new lineups from our total pool into our 150. But what I actually like to do is let the builder do its work and just lower his projection to something that I find more reasonable, which I honestly think is probably a 12-point projection. So we're going to do that. And so now we get him 24% of the time. So actually I had a pretty good estimate. So that's one way you can adjust exposures. But what I really like about Saber is these team and game stack exposures. So we give you like a really clear picture of what kind of stacks you're getting. So we have team stacks, which is basically who we're getting on a team level. Game stacks, so exposure to, I think the rule is maybe at least a stack of a quarterback and a receiver with someone else on the other team. So you can raise the min and max exposure of those game stacks. And then we look at the stack type. So a QB plus 2 people on the same offense, maybe a QP plus 2 people on the same offense with 1 from the other game, and you can raise min and max exposure to this. So I think one thing that's standing out to me is we have a lot of exposure to this Atlanta Minnesota game. I don't know if I love that. And given that we're doing something in the Million Ranker, I mean, maybe Danny disagrees, but I kind of just want to get more even exposure, right?
Sure. Maybe it would be better to get some diversity. I mean, clearly SaberSim really likes this game, so you
Right.
kind of, and maybe some of that is some upside or something that is not that easy to understand why it's happening, but something that the simulation is capturing.
Right. Again, we're building something on correlation and ownership and upside, and we're maximizing for this thing that we call Saber score instead of the actual average projection, which this is the score that includes the correlation and the ownership fade and the upside and so on. So there probably is something hidden there that we should actually trust. But that being said, there's 17 weeks of the NFL season. Maybe I personally like to get a little more diversity. So what we can do is we can just lower the max exposure of that game stack and allow us to get more stacks from particular game. So you have a lot of post build control with SaberSim that I really like, and that is basically our process. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned something about how to use the SaberSim lineup builder. Sunday is only a few days away, so if you have any questions about us, you can tweet us at MaxJSteinberg on Twitter. You can tweet Danny at DanielSingerS on Twitter. You can also join the SaberSim Slack channel. Also, we have a promotion going on right now that you can try us free for 3 days, which usually other sites don't let you try them for free, and we're giving that offer. So you really have nothing to lose. Just actually give us a try and see if you like us better than maybe a lineup builder that you've used in the past. And good luck with your lineups, regardless if you use SaberSim or not. Hope you win that $1 million or hope you win that big prize, whatever that may be. So thanks for watching and good luck this Sunday.